Well, I'm just wondering, just the process, and I can see it go to the selectmen tomorrow night, and they say if it's a good idea, it's just like the landing committee, put together a committee, we have representatives of the select board, the planning board, maybe this committee, and certainly the planning department. I'm just wondering, it seems to be that this parking lot has been talked about for a long time. Well, lack of parking has been talked about for a long time, and it seems to have run into an impasse. I'm just wondering how we break that impasse, and I'm wondering why there was an impasse.
I think it's just, I don't know why there's an impasse. We were asked to help. We've helped. It's part of what we've done when we've been asked to help, like at the landing. As I said, the sort of planning around, we did some planning. As you know, Dick, around, and neighbors will recall when we engaged MAPC to help look at the whole campus, right?
Right.
So if there's additional interest in continuing that planning effort, then that planning effort could still come through our committee, just the same as it did in Milton Village, right? Mm-hmm. But if there's if there's not an interest in continuing that planning work, then it could go either to its deathbed someplace, or it could go advance to next steps, which due diligence steps to me is you still need to do more engineering work. You need to see what the sort of as a geotechnical work, a little more, I'd say feasibility in terms of like the cost estimates, very preliminary. But if you engage with someone to do a little more engineering work on how you would support that parking lot, kind of refine it to see if it really makes sense financially to go forward with that.
Would that be us?
I'm saying we could continue that, just like we remember in Milton Landing, we engaged for dredging, we engaged an engineer to help out there. We ended up having zoning written that was, so it was multi-stage, right? Mm-hmm. There. And then when we handed that off, there was a good bit of work that had already been done.
Right.
So that's kind of the idea here. We get it to a certain level where it's at a decision point. We were asked at this juncture to get feedback, which is what we're looking to do.
Right.
And we either that feedback will say, yes, keep going a little further, or that feedback will say, yes, thank you. We've done great work. We'll take it from here. So that's kind of where we are with it. If the planning board, in terms of what a planning board would do for something like this, would probably be right zoning if a new use was going to be incorporated. Right. So let's say, it was going to be some mixed use of housing, which isn't municipal, right? So that would be the only reason a planning board would need to really get involved. If it's a municipal use, that doesn't go to the planning board for any review.
Right.
So there's no purview at all at the planning board for a municipal use. Right. Some people think that there should be, but there because like planning board didn't review the fire stations, planning board doesn't review the schools or anything like that. Planning board doesn't review gravel roads, lower field, which some people have talked about.
So just like the landing, this would probably end up going to the planning department.
No.
Who did the landing? No, they did a lot of the dredging work. They dealt with Childs. They dealt with
the contract.
I mean,
but contract.
Administratively,
right.
The select board is choose to move forward with this and engage as an engineer, we would administratively deal with the engineer. But our responsibility is to develop the zoning for the planning board. If it was multifamily, we would work with them. But if it wasn't
multifamily, then it would be yours, then, right?
The planning department?
Yeah.
It would go to the planning board if it were going to be a use that needed zoning, because you wouldn't be able to do multifamily.
Right, but without the new zoning, that would become the planning. I'm just trying to figure out where all these pieces fit, because one of the things that happens in these things, when you get so many pieces involved, then nothing happens. We know that.
I mean, that's the worry, right? So that as I said, I spoke to Will and to Chris in preparation for tomorrow night's meeting, and I said, well, would you like to, continue to have this committee continue to do some more work on this? They said, we're pleased that we're advancing this with this committee's help. And so if that can happen, we would like that to happen. But it's really just, as we all talked about a couple times at these meetings, we were asked to go give a briefing to the board, and that's what we're doing. So it's really, they're going to talk about the needs of the library, just like they have done here.
Right.
And I'm going to talk about what we've done today in terms of looking at the center.
Right, okay.
Well, not really. I'm going to talk about, briefly we'll talk about being able to, the analysis of the parking utilization. Mm-hmm. we haven't had any layouts from Chase. He's been unavailable to do them with a little short of staffing shortage there. So Josh touched base with him last week, and he hasn't been able to. But Josh has looked at it and thought that it's 20 spaces.
18 spaces feasibly, if huge emphasis on if. You could technically fit about 12 spaces where the green shed is behind the chemical building. You could technically fit 6 spaces, sort of egress from Town Hall onto Canton Ave. That's what I showed you all in the last 2 MPEC meetings. So this isn't
So,
but literally, I think both of those proposals are unlikely, highly unlikely to happen. The egress, there's the statue there, the sculpture that I don't think anyone wants to see lost, including no one wants to see additional green space lost. The green building behind the chemical building has a long ways to go if it is taken down at some point or falls down of its own accord. And there's been no planning efforts or discussion in any meaningful way from any committees or from the fire chief to remove that building.
Okay.
That building is also one of the contributing buildings in the historic district here.
Exactly.
I looked up. Yes.
A couple of things.
So with the table, Roxanne? It's ready for you, yeah?
No, I'm in the front there.
So Roxanne, you can introduce yourself.
Hi, Roxanne Musto, from the select board. So with the spaces, Josh, when you're talking about the egress, you're talking about if you're leaving Town Hall, going up to Canton Ave.
Exactly, yes.
Where they already park.
Yes.
On the side. So right now, that's what people are already doing.
So,
and then it seems like you might only have to bring that granite curbing in a little bit. I'd want to see what Chase thinks about that.
Yeah, I can tell you what Chase will think is that it's about fire access, right? Its width is about the fire trucks.
Because the fire truck is getting down there.
But it's legally mandated to not be parking there, even though people speed and people litter. Like, it's not what we can allow. And that is the width that is allowable and required under the fire code. So it would have to be widened at least the width of a car to allow for parking because of those statutory requirements.
So I think that was one thing. The other thing is, I know I had mentioned, I didn't know in the meantime if the library has reached out to the churches to see about any kind of a partnership or something with getting more spaces, especially if we're talking about potentially putting a crosswalk in across Canton Ave. A lot of times businesses will do that and work out something where they pay a nominal fee or whatever to, use the parking lot at different times. So do we have any idea from the library if that has been attempted, and if so, what the response has been? Because I know, for instance, they had said, for instance, on, I think it's Tuesdays in the mornings or something, that they have a big need for parking. They'd like to bring in more programming. So my question is, perhaps that is something that is explored a little bit, a few hours on these different time frames.
I don't think we have any representatives from the library here tonight, since the focus has been getting ready for the presentation, but you're meeting tomorrow night.
But to the crosswalk that you mentioned,
you can ask them now.
We're expecting final design documents from Beta this week, and Chase is progressing with that project. I think it's no longer an if and will be a when for that crosswalk, which is the step one.
There was a question about, I think, on that crosswalk about a light. Do you know whether like a button to push?
So yeah, Chase has set designs for RRFBs. I don't know what the first R stands for, but it's the rectangular flashing beacons. So you press the button and it would flash, but it wouldn't be like a stoplight. But the crosswalk sign itself.
So that's what's planned right now?
That's what's expected. Okay. I haven't seen the design documents.
Okay. So really, I think our next steps we'll know better tomorrow night, and we can discuss at our next meeting. Is there anything that you want to share with us that you're going to be any other thoughts that you may not have shared with us at the last meeting?
I just have one follow-up question. Obviously, as you know from our last meeting, we do have an interest in this green shed. How long has the library been seeking additional parking? And did it date back to our initial fire building design and planning meetings where that parking lot was evaluated to an extent?
I think back to 2012 is my understanding that the library was looking for parking, but they were focused more on the breed sale at the time. You know, thinking, and that had to get evaluated for wetlands, you know, so it gets flagged and then it has to get mapped onto a survey. And then there's a layout to what parking would fit there. So I think that took a little bit of time. So maybe I'm not sure about the overlap of when the meetings were for the fire station. I know we asked for the fire station building committee to come to our or to meet with us, just so that the fire stations wouldn't be looked at only for their purposes and not preclude something sort of with the rest of the campus, you know, sort of thinking like the campus holistically.
I remember extensive conversations about that part,
yes,
in particular, ensuring that it continued to be a one-way so that the fire truck could exit down to Reedsdale from that direction. But that area had been looked at for an extended period of time. And it's interesting that we're going back to look at that same area as kind of concluding the fire station work.
Yeah, I think, you know,
and we ensure that these conversations continue from committee to committee so that we're not backtracking in time and additional cost and time to.
That is a really good question because, as you know, staff members change and committee members change. And there's one thing about this committee is that Dick and Tabor and I have been on it from the beginning. So there is some continuity with the three of us. And I do remember the conversations too, with some planning efforts, which I think you all were when MAPC was taking a look at where we could add parking. And it was pretty much just a few spaces, maybe here and there, right? Which the library has said isn't ideal for them because it's across the street and it's not the number that they need. And so, and the times that they need during the day are when the town is the most occupied from the work that Josh has done. So the library feels as if the town center piece of it isn't going to meet their needs, they've said at our meetings. And I think they'll probably mention that again tomorrow night at the select board meeting. Because it doesn't get them close to the number that they'd like. And they'll go over the reasons why they'd like to get the numbers. But basically, it's a very popular facility, you know, and they can't do as much programming as there's demand for because they at certain popular times because of the not having enough parking.
Cheryl, okay, sorry, I wasn't here at the last meeting and I just don't know all the individuals.
Oh, sure, yeah, I'm sorry.
Jennifer Renz, I am a neighbor of 48 Walnut Street.
And Maria Conley, I am at 20 Walnut Street.
Carlin Donovan, I'm at 7 Taylor Road.
Yeah, Michelle Long, 27.
So they were participants in the fire station building committee planning, which we really were not so much, but when we had MAPC take a look, we asked the fire station building committee to come to us just so we can make sure that they were thinking of more holistically. And probably the largest input that we had was the old fire station piece that's going to be used for training, but also potentially for community use, not dump immediately into parking spaces so that as people walk out of a meeting or even a large group had to exit out, that there's a little bit of like a, you know, people will talk to each other on the way out, like a little plaza-like space in front of it. And then we also really asked them to really think a lot about the circulation. You have we had youth participate in that planning. So from Pierce and the high school, and there is some, walking that occurs through the area. And we talked about the basketball court, which is in the green space there. And, you know, I don't know if you know that the town administrator put in for a grant to the Community Preservation Committee to improve the basketball court. And the committee recommends that get funded, and that'll go to town meeting in May. So there'll be some funds to improve that. And then the other thing that the our committee really wanted to make sure was that the pedestrian connection to the Council on Aging is there in a way that is accessible to that population, so they can cross over Walnut. And we recommended sidewalks on Walnut. That's something that gets turned over to the DPW.
That came up in the fight.
Yeah. Brian wants to talk to you recently about that.
Oh, no, I haven't talked to him recently.
Okay, because the last fire station building committee meeting, I got there late, but Maria was there. And they did talk about the path, but Maria was the one who brought up, but there's no sidewalks. So then it kind of went a little, and correct me if I'm wrong, back and forth about, well, who, is that Cheryl with the Master Plan Implementation Committee, or is that DPW, or that, so?
It's DPW that would follow up on it now, follow through with it now.
Okay.
It was clear that they couldn't make that part of their project, but the path through the park, I understood, was still going to be part of their project. Yeah.
Right.
And then, you know, some things that are, you know, that's the thing about this committee with the planning work. It dabbles in different things. Like you mentioned other committees and other work. And so we did ask, I think, when Chase was in about those sidewalks, Chase Berkeley was in, and they're probably on a list.
Yeah, the engineering staff in DPW has a master list of their whole repaving program, and repaving also includes new sidewalks, but that's on site different.
Yeah, so I really trying to keep all these pieces together to ensure that things don't fall through.
Right.
And we need to circle back. So
that's one of the things, if we do continue any planning, further planning, you know, if there was, you know, another kind of report, a handoff report that came from that. We kind of just left that as the fire station building committee interface. We didn't really leave it that we were done with town center planning. So, you know, if we did more, we could look at, you know, making that something that you could then go and ask for some priority, you know, where that goes on the list. I don't know, but.
yeah, the street needs to be repaved because of all the pipe work that had been done previous to the fire station building being complete. But they wanted to wait for the paving to be done until the fire station was done. Why would they repave if they're going to, you know, 2 years down the road, put in an extension of the sidewalk? Just making sure things are occurring in a logical order. And how do we continue to follow the bouncing ball through
right
from start to finish?
I guess I don't know, Roxanne, in terms of the select board having any role in those sidewalks being added.
Well, usually my impression is that we usually only do the repaving on a project. If they're going to add the sidewalks, they'll add it then.
Okay.
But again, we'd have to run that by Chase. I mean, that's my understanding. And there's a certain, you know, list of streets and things that are getting done at certain intervals.
So would it make sense have you asked Chase for when those would be considered in terms of their?
Well, we asked at the fire station building Monday, and they said they had given Chase the all clear for their heavy equipment on the road. So it was clear to repave.
Okay.
But they did not have any control over the sidewalk piece of it.
Okay.
Michelle doing it.
Yes.
That was
so they reached out to Chase and don't as a starting point, right? And
sure.
Then would they? I know some people have come to the select board for things like speed bumps or other things, but I'm just wondering if they don't have a response from Chase, do you have a suggestion of what they might do next?
Well, I mean, if you tell me exactly what you want me to ask him, I'm happy to do that because I actually have to talk to him anyways, but something else.
Just actually, now that I'm thinking, looking back, there was an email that we sent. I think you had asked us to follow up after the last meeting with the DPW, right, requesting sidewalks, and we did. And Chase got back and said, our plans are to reconstruct Clapp Street and Walnut Street this upcoming construction season, but we do not have hard dates on when yet. There currently is no plan to create new sidewalks and a crosswalk at Walnut and Clap, but the fire station project will be building a new sidewalk across the street on Walnut from the Council on Aging front walkway towards the town hall through the grass. So I think that's the pathway.
Yeah, so that's what we brought up to Brian Walsh at the meeting. We said, oh, that's great, if you have this beautiful path, but where is it going? And they all were a little like,
We don't know.
yeah, you're right. And they looked at they had I don't have that sort of map or drawing, and there's nothing there. So they brought up your name, like, oh, okay, well, I think we need to talk to Cheryl. So it's a little mishmash, and that's why we're going to this meeting and the conversation meeting.
Was that, we can evaluate if building new sidewalks, continuing it on Walnut across, it would be basically across, unless they switch sides of the street, it would be across the Council on Aging front lawn.
Yeah.
And so he's like, we have to see if there's support for that from all parties involved.
All right, so I guess it's worth figuring out then how do they get that? How do they find out that support? I don't know what they typically do if they've been asked. Like,
I guess the recommendation was for the path to go from the Council on Aging across the park on the side of the fire station building, but we're missing a piece of that, which is
right. So like the
what's it
master
connecting
plan,
to?
right. So the master plan itself talks about improving the pedestrian connections amongst the municipal uses, right? The Council on Aging, the library, the town hall, et cetera. And so that's why in our planning effort, we said, okay, those connections, you need sidewalks, right? You need to say, especially you're talking about youth population is coming and going and another population that's crossing, you really need the sidewalks, right? So that's where all of that came from. And, we helped fund the bicycle pedestrian master plan, which was also, and then we have in town the Complete Streets program. And so the Complete Streets program is where the DPW has a plan. And in that plan, when they work on the roadways, like Josh was saying, they are to also be looking at the sidewalks.
And every sidewalk gets ADA accessibility for curb cuts, and we're adding the tactile elements as well.
So I don't know if that street is in that plan, but it's worth checking. And then in terms of prioritization of the missing links, if you will, it's generally like if it's near the schools, right? So that students can walk safely on sidewalks. And I don't know how else in that pedestrian and bicycle master plan they've prioritized, but that would, I guess, those are my thoughts of where those priorities could be, if anywhere outside of our planning efforts.
Yeah, Walnut's not in the Complete Streets prioritization plan.
Okay.
Thatcher is, but it's a part of that general ecosystem. And the bicycle and pedestrian master plan has certain general recommendations that would apply to this, but does not include Walnut Street as part of that connected network.
So would it help then for us to write a letter of support based on our planning efforts, saying this was recommended in our planning efforts?
I'm completely mystify what's going on here. You want a sidewalk built where you live, right? Which is down the street, around where you live.
The point of this walkway that was recommended by MPIC to connect the Council on Aging to the front of the fire station and toward the town hall is incomplete.
Right.
And so there's just this pathway that leads to nothing. How are the members at the Council on Aging going to cross safely?
So you've made the proposal, you've talked to Chase, and Chase said it's somewhere in this another world where it's in town government.
I mean, we haven't made a formal.
Well, maybe that's almost what you need at some point.
But I really don't think this is us. I think this is more of an neighborhood decision. This isn't, the path came from MPIC. So I would think your path has to lead somewhere safely,
Well, the
right?
sidewalks were recommended at the same time the path.
Okay, but
So I
then,
was just trying to see if, then we were told though by the fire station building committee that they could just do the path, that they couldn't be responsible to do the sidewalks in their project budget.
That makes sense.
yeah,
So they did say that.
Yeah.
So then from there, it gets passed on, which is
That's where we're
the
trying
piece
to
that you're
figure
trying to figure out.
right.
Cheryl, sorry, I just wanted to add a comment.
Sure.
I think given where we are today and this missing piece, it might be worth providing a letter, like to your suggestion of here's the history, because they're not in the complete streets, what do you call it, program?
But that was also completed
But
a
we're
while
in a
ago.
different scenario now. There wasn't a path at that time. And so I think we need to just make a recommendation and provide a history and see if we can move it forward.
Okay, so did you find it?
No, the last thing I have is from May, and you only say sidewalks
Okay.
with no details in that.
All right, so I was just going to see if we could pull up the MAPC plan, which I could, we could do. Does everybody recalling the plan, or would you like me to try and call it up now? The MAPC plan, which is from,
Where the path is?
yeah, where the path and where the sidewalk recommendation was.
But the sidewalk recommendation is it's not actually that long.
Right, no,
It stops right at the Council on Aging.
yeah,
It needs to come across.
I got it.
you got it, okay.
I think it's just an example of ensuring that all committees are communicating and
Here we go, yeah.
and things are being accomplished the way everyone had agreed and envisioned.
That's what I take that.
Yeah.
But
So it's number six. Number
It's six
in the
is
same-
Number 7 would be the crosswalk, which doesn't exist either, right?
But the fire station building committee took responsibility for this.
Oh, that's interesting, because is that the crosswalk that you're pointing to?
Or just,
Did they just do the path and not do the crosswalk? Because I thought that they were going to do the crosswalk. No, I noticed that too when I came up today. But that's this path is the configuration's changed a little bit, but that my understanding was that was staying in the project.
The path is at
Yeah.
the last fire station building
Yeah,
meeting.
okay.
It is in the plan, but it as number 6 leads to
Nothing.
nothing. There's no sidewalks.
need to come down to Clap Street.
So 7, right, on 7 on here, is that Walnut? That,
Yeah.
what,
This is Walnut here.
okay,
Crosswalks.
so
This is
7,
Clap here.
I see. So there's no crosswalk in their plan designs. There's no sidewalk in their plan
Okay.
designs.
So
Crosswalk in there? I don't remember.
No.
It's not.
See, like-
Can you just show on that?
Yeah, so what we're, do you mind, Cheryl?
Oh, no, yeah. Go ahead.
So, okay, so they, so they have kept the path.
Yeah.
But it just goes to nowhere. So we're looking to, get like an ADA sort of compliant sidewalk curbage, something, and then write a crosswalk here
Mhm.
so that our.
I'm sorry, Josh, can you outline where she's pointing? Because I can't see it.
I've been following it as best I can with my. See that?
Yeah, sure.
Remember?
Yep, thank you.
Sorry, Regina.
Is there a sidewalk on both sides of Walnut?
Not in that spot.
But isn't it down further only on one side?
Yeah.
There's no sidewalk for your.
Not on my, no.
No, so.
That piece, there's not a sidewalk on either side.
So the sidewalk exists up until this blue line. Sort of.
So that was the missing piece that was recommended be put in.
There's so much traffic that goes through there. If we're going to be highlighting this safe route to go from the Council on Aging, even for all of the middle school students that cut through to go through to the teen center or to the library, there needs to be some safety factors ensured upon. And this pathway is going to attract pedestrians, but it feeds into a dangerous part of the street because it goes people fly up Walnut, it crests, and you cannot see that part of the street. And then they don't even stop at the bottom of Walnut, and they bang a hard left onto Clap. There are no sidewalks over there. It's just, it can be a very dangerous corner. So if we're attracting more pedestrian use there, we really do need to make sure all of these pieces come together. Because you had recommended them, but that piece of it is not in anybody's plan.
Yeah.
And it's not us as we invested in this area, this neighborhood. It's our home, but also to ensure that all of these conversations are continuing to meet the same goal.
Right. Okay. So I think we could write a letter that is addressed to Chief Berkeley, and we could copy Nick Milano and the select board.
Sure.
And we're happy to help, try and nudge things along as we do, as we've done as a committee. So
I think there's a hard deadline coming up with the repaving, so that's a good, this is a good time to do it, to say, we really don't like the idea of you repaving, unless you're gonna do it the right way.
Yeah. Okay, so do I have a volunteer to draft the letter? Elaine?
I don't know the history. Can you put at least some bullets together, and then I'll draft the letter.
Great, thank you.
Sure. Can I just come up? And if they don't have money or whatnot, the pathway was through the MPIC. The neighbors were fine with it just being green space, right? I mean, would we all kind of agree? So that's where we're like, okay, so we're listening, we're going with this. Okay, there's going to be a path. We just want to make sure that it's safe for our children, for our parents who are using the Council on Aging, that, again, as you were saying, that all parties, all committees are communicating with one another, and that we're going to make this work and be accessible to all in a safe manner.
Right. And I think that aligns with our goals too. And really appreciate you bringing it to our attention.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And then can I just make one point with what you brought up about seeing if the churches would partner with the library. Taking down the green shed, that would impact where I live. It's a barrier to just a lot of things that are going on around there. Michelle's house abuts that area right there, the green shed. So that would be a concern for the neighborhood.
I'm talking about both of the church. Well, so I'm not talking about the green shed. I'm talking about like the existing lots.
No, I think that's wonderful. If we could partner with that instead of the possibility of removing the green shed. Removing the green shed would change the feel. It is, would change the feel of the neighborhood, and there would be major concern there. So if there is a partnership, and again, it sounds like the library doesn't want to really deal with that anyways because it's across the street, but if it's a possibility, to us, that's a better way to go than the thought of the green shed going. I just wanted to.
It's
not a pretty green shed by any means, but we'll take it if we have to.
It's interesting too, because it's one of the contributing buildings of the National Historic.
Which is so interesting.
Yeah, because I was looking up all of the town's historic national districts, and that's one I wouldn't have known, but it is one of the contributing buildings. Yeah. It's like
the green shed is a historic.
Yeah, there actually is. The fun. It's competitive.
Am I hearing that right? The green shed is a historic building?
I'm sorry, Regina?
Am I hearing that right? The green shed is a historic building?
Well, you might be surprised, but it is one of the buildings listed in the National Register Historic District for the town center.
Okay.
In the 1800s.
It could be painted. So it doesn't have to be green.
They don't all have to be municipal property. You could look and decide, but it is. I just thought I'd point it out. I noticed that, and I was a little surprised. But okay, so Alex, I'm sorry because I thought we were going to be quicker, but we
sausage is made. My son is one of those best boys who walks through there.
So
We're looking out for his safety as well too.
They currently cut through the Council on Aging parking lot
Yeah.
and they feed out of their driveway and have nowhere to go. So it would make a lot more sense to just cross right there.
right there, yeah. And we were able to recommend, and Chase was able to implement the new crosswalk on Canton Ave.
Yeah.
Do you think he would be able to do that with our recommendation here as well? I don't want to put you on the spot, but I don't remember how he came up with the funding to be able to prioritize that.
I think funding is the challenge, right? Because there's a certain amount to help with additional non-originally budgeted line items. Crosswalks would be an easier financial lift for DPW than an additional sidewalk. I mean, what was it? 350 odd feet sort of doing the L around. I think you could likely see crosswalks, whether that crosswalk has flashing beacons or stuff that may be more tricky, especially given.
Well,
but just to say that like there are variabilities in costs for the development of a crosswalk, and that kind of additional cost would be a challenge. The repaving schedule is also a budget, right? It's not just a timeline. It's sort of part of DPW engineering's budget. There's no harm in writing a letter. The challenge, one of the key challenges for stuff like this that isn't officially in a specific budget or in a specific sort of additional fund is that, especially on transit related things, MassWorks, we're not currently eligible for additional sort of grant funding for projects like this. Due to MTA communities.
Is CPA funding at all possible?
No, it's not allowed to be used for sidewalks or transit things really.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
So a letter and pressure is always good, but from my experience, I can guarantee.
Are we not eligible or at a disadvantage on the Complete Streets grants as well? You know?
Yes. Any discretionary grant is able to take this into consideration. And all of our sort of conversations and experience indicates that they are taking compliance into consideration. Whether that's on their scorecards or on how they sort of determine priorities between sort of otherwise equal projects.
And just to be clear here, we're talking about the MBTA communities compliance.
Yes.
Yep.
Basically, in our departmental budgeting is assuming that we are unable to acquire any new discretionary grants for anything that hasn't been applied for yet.
So matching grants from MAPC, even though we pay into MAPC, maybe we get those.
Maybe.
But that's not funding a sidewalk. It's just more
engineering work.
Yeah.
But that's if they can't do it in the repaving, does that mean they wouldn't do it until the 30 years from now when it needs repaving again? So do you know? I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
No, and
it's not you.
Yeah, it's so all I can speak to is what I've experienced in my time here and what I can sort of reasonably assume. It's certainly possible that we can get new sidewalks. I think given proximity to Pierce and to the high school, Safe Routes to School, which is a federal program managed by the federal DOT, we could probably leverage that as a way to secure additional funding, sort of through a grant that isn't state managed.
So I have another suggestion. Maybe
and
a letter to us. It was with these, with the kids kind of crossing that you see, and then we can include that. I mean, it could be the other, council meeting for others too. But I mean, I think to what your point about the Safe Routes to School. And I don't know if the Council on Aging has any grant opportunities, for connections or I know that walkability for health benefits, is something that, is in art, even like, American Rose on the Papers and
Tai
stuff.
Chi classes over on the basketball
exactly.
court, so I would think that they would have an interest in the safety of their members.
And with the repaving, one of the things at the CPC, so I'm the planning board's representative to that committee as well. That we talked about was a lot of the funding goes for youth programming, which is fine for the kids, but having a little bit there, the seniors, can benefit from that improvement to that. It's right across the street, so maybe other classes could be held there. So I do think that accessibility piece of it for multiple populations is probably a good thing that we could put in the letter. But having your experience, it's something that we reference, we can attach to our letter, could be beneficial too. That's right. The way it would work is we review a draft, in a public meeting. So we would review that at our next meeting. So things don't happen overnight with committee work. All right.
All right.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to put on the sheet. Thank you. Thank you.
Do you want your chair back? Nice comfy chair to the
I've carried
Come on.
plenty of chairs this evening.
Thanks, Josh.
Doing musical chairs for a minute here, right? Here you go.
Looks like you're on.
Yeah, we're going to go to you, Alex. Thank you for your patience. I'm glad you found your discussion interesting.
I think you said that.
Definitely.
Just like we're going to find this discussion interesting, right there. All right.
That's what I wanted to say.
Go back to fall.
All right. So I remember at one point, Josh had said when we talked about sustainability, which was a long time ago in terms of the topics we talked about now, that we had the climate action planning committee, and that they were getting started. We had Sustainable Milton coming, but was that you that came in? No, who came in from Sustainable Milton?
Tucker came, and I believe one.
Okay, so we now are going to fill this in a little bit with the Climate Action Planning Committee in terms of our the master plan. We're looking at how it could be updated since it's coming upon its 10 years. It wasn't very specific in terms of sustainability goals, and we've talked about that's one of the areas that could be updated. Things have changed a lot in 10 years, right? Some things don't change that rapidly, but that is one area, obviously, that has. And I think we talked about knowing that the new energy code was coming along, and that maybe that would be a recommendation that came out of the Climate Action Planning Committee. But so I saw that you made the presentation to the select board, making the request on behalf of Sustainable Milton for the opt-in specialized energy code. So I thought that would be, we could cover both of those tonight, and the rest of the committee can be brought up to speed.
Marvelous. What order would you like to take it? I have a few slides I put together on.
However you'd like to do it.
I feel like it almost helps to start with something more specific.
Okay.
So when we talk about timelines for drafting plans, it's not totally abstract. So maybe I'll go with the material first.
Okay.
And where's the button?
It's the only green one.
Can you see that, Regina?
Yes, ma'am.
Excellent.
Really detest the speed of these transitions, but I don't know how to change it. Maybe I will just, is this big enough I do it like this? Okay, no, I'll live with the slideshow transitions. Okay, so I want to introduce the topic with a really fast overview of what's happening in Massachusetts regarding climate change and the state's plans to address it. So in 2021, the Commonwealth passed a law committing Massachusetts to achieve net zero emissions by 2050, with legally binding targets in 2030 and 2040 as well. And it's spun up a massive effort at the state level to do all the things that implies. And for purposes of this discussion, I think it's important to sort of understand the broad shape of that strategy, which is a focus on electrification, because while the electrical grid doesn't have the capacity today to serve the anticipated demand, and it obviously uses a lot of fossil fuels to generate our electricity today, there's a pathway that's sort of possible and fairly well understood to expand the grid and power it with renewable sources over that sort of multi-decade timeframe. So that's one branch of the strategy, and in parallel, taking these sort of activities of daily living that depend on fossil fuels, primarily driving around and heating our homes, and transitioning those to electricity from fossil fuels in parallel, right? So while today, if you buy an EV, the electricity that you charge it with is going to be partially generated with fossil fuels. Over the lifetime of that car, the electricity is getting greener and greener. And then a third piece of the puzzle is a laser focus on energy efficiency, because if we just convert everything to electricity, but we are wasteful about it, then it becomes a lot harder to meet the demand with green electricity. So this is the sort of the bulk of the plan. And then carbon sequestration, maintaining and stewarding our natural lands, resources, and in particular their ability to sequester carbon, is the net and net zero. So that's the 4 pieces on this slide. So where does the specialized opt-in municipal building code fit into all that? So emissions from heating and cooling buildings are one of the biggest sources of greenhouse gas emissions in the state. Don't have it in front of me, but in Milton, it's transportation is the largest. Buildings are a close second. And one of the reasons transportation is largest is because we have highways and lots of heavy traffic. So for many similarly sized communities that don't have highways, buildings are the single largest source of emissions. Since 2008, I believe, when Massachusetts passed the Green Communities Act, municipalities have had 2 levels of building code to choose from. So the base code was pre-existing code. It follows the International Energy Conservation Code, which is a kind of national or international consortium of builders that develop these codes. And Massachusetts more or less adopts that with some small amendments. And then the Green Communities Act added the stretch code, and Milton adopted the stretch code as part of becoming a green community in 2011. So that is our current building code. After the passage of the climate law, there were some gaps between what the stretch code requires and what's necessary to achieve the state's climate goals, and in particular electrification of buildings. So the specialized code was mandated to be developed as an add-on to the stretch code that would bring it into alignment with the state's climate goals. So the current situation is that we're on the stretch code. The stretch code has updates every 3 years, and there are updates going into effect in Milton July 2024. So those are happening regardless of the outcome of any vote on the specialized code. The specialized opt-in code, to my guess from the opt-in, requires a town meeting vote to be adopted in Milton. And that was what Sustainable Milton asked the select board to put on the warrant. So it's actually a request that came from Sustainable Milton. And when we talk about the Climate Action Committee, I'll explain that we're still kind of in a research and information gathering mode. And so we haven't yet made any recommendations about anything. So this is a Sustainable Milton request. Any questions so far?
I have a good one.
Yes.
So when I look at the pyramid, what is the difference between what's going to happen in July of 2024 versus the specialized code? So what changes will be brought in 2024?
The July 2024?
Yeah.
Do we know? I think there's some slides on that. Yeah, so I think there's more angst about those changes than about what's in the specialized code, to be very transparent. It might help to sort of address it once we've introduced the terminology. But
we're just looking at the pyramid.
Yes.
One thing I'll say is I understand that the base code is basically being revised also, and it's going to make the stretch code won't exceed the base code for much longer.
That I haven't heard.
I think that may be correct in the sense that like the base code is being updated and will meet at some point where the current stretch code is, and will continue to become efficient regardless of our adoption of stretch or specialized codes. And that's not to say we shouldn't, but like the stretch code, the base code becomes more efficient every update. It's really that.
Yeah, I guess what I was suggesting is they all keep going. So like what's coming up in now probably will not far exceed what's going to become the base in over time. So, I mean, that's my understanding, but the timing of that, I don't know.
I think there is an IECC code update expected for 2024.
It was supposed to come out, I think, already, but it's behind schedule.
But the stretch code will always be more efficient than the base code, and specialized will have additional requirements on top of the stretch.
Yeah, it depends if some people are successful with the base making it so that it's not opt-in. Because stretch code is still opt-in for people who haven't opted in already. In other words, some communities are still based, but in any case, we could.
Yeah, so I want to start with the kind of high level that I hope you'll take away from this discussion. Then I'll go into details and then resurface and show you this slide again. And see if you still agree with me and you see the details. So the key points are that the new requirements in the specialized code, that's what changes if the warrant article is adopted versus what would happen anyway with the stretch code. Those new requirements apply to new construction only, not to existing homes and renovations. You may have heard about requirements that apply to significant renovations of existing homes. Those are all in the stretch code and will be enforced in Milton either way. The purpose of these additional requirements is to encourage all electric construction in new buildings, not require it. So there's still mixed fuel pathways for compliance. And as of today, all electric building construction is a cost competitive, healthy option. A lot of large multifamily buildings are going this way just because it's the most economical way to build. And furthermore, necessary to address climate change. To keep that in there. I like to think of it as preserving choice for present and future energy needs. So, heating with natural gas is in many situations, not all, but in many, like the most economical way to keep it home today. Natural gas prices are expected to increase significantly in coming decades. And of course, nobody knows the future. The cost of electricity and natural gas will change in the future. These building code requirements make it easier to electrify without needing costly retrofits. It's much easier to put in the right service size and the right wiring when the walls are down than later when the building's occupied. So getting into what are these incremental requirements? One, pre-wiring for electrification. So new buildings that use fossil fuels must pre-wire for future electrification. Maybe shouldn't have included EV charging because that's actually part of the stretch code. So that's not an requirement.
Would happen regardless of whether that's opted out.
Pre-wiring for EV charging is part of the stretch code. But this is things like making sure there are the right number of 50 amp circuits for heat pumps and EV chargers, and the 200 amp service on a new single family home, which I think most builders would do anyway. There's a solar requirement for new buildings that use fossil fuels. Need to install a certain amount of on-site solar to offset their emissions. Not like a net zero offset. Just there's a formula based on the square footage, and there are exceptions for sites that are shaded. And then for large homes and large multifamilies, there are more stringent energy efficiency requirements. So we can go into the names for those, which gets a little beyond my pay grade on a subsequent slide. But again, they don't affect renovations or additions of existing homes. And the point is to remove obstacles to future necessary electrification, and the additional construction costs associated with these are more than offset by lower energy costs once the building's occupied. So I started to get into this. Pre-wiring is adequate electrical service and designated circuits for heating, hot water, cooking, clothes drying, electrical vehicle charging. So this is maybe where we can start to actually, let me look at this slide first. I think before we start talking about what's in the stretch code versus the specialized code, it's useful to introduce this notion of a HERS index, HERS, Home Efficiency Rating System. Yep, did I get that? All right. So this is basically a single number summary of a home's energy efficiency, where 100 is a sort of typical home as of 2006. And a lower number means that the home consumes less energy. So we made big strides on home energy efficiency since 2006. The average new building constructed in Massachusetts, and I don't have it on the slide, but I think 2022, I may be wrong about that, was 58. The stretch code requires here. currently requires a Hearst index of, I think, 53, something in the 50s. And the change that's coming in July is that number is dropping down to 42 or 45, depending on whether you're all electric or mixed fuel. So this is, the number is established by certified Hearst raters using a complex process that I cannot begin to explain. But you sort of get different credits for, insulation or, installing different appliances.
The efficiency of the appliances.
I think we have several members of the committee who could explain it. But hopefully, so yes, Hearst Zero means the home produces as much energy as it consumes, not that it consumes no energy. And you'll often hear about passive house standard, which I'm told is roughly about 20.
Yeah. When does the Hearst rater get involved? Does someone come into your? Usually too late. Is it like a mass save energy audit? I mean, you invite the person in, does the person show up and do it because you request them to come in and do an audit?
Getting the certificate of occupancy.
You have to go out and find them and hire them.
You hire them depending upon how big it is and how much renovation it is. You hire them to get as part of the building permit process. So they take the information from the.
And these are private companies.
Yes.
The state has a list of certified vendors that they have provided support for.
And you know something like this would cost?
So
$1,500.
You can do, well, $1,500 if you're doing both. So then there's an initial piece, which is to get the building permit, and then they have to come during construction. And you can wait till the end, but you might want them to come before the end, because what they're going to do is blower door test, which is basically going to see how tight, if you will, your building is, so that you're not having air leakage. Because that air leakage is, you can put in as much insulation as you want, but if you've got air leakage at places, you're not going to have the energy efficiency that it's designed for. So they'll come out and test for that. And if it doesn't pass, it doesn't meet, then you can't get your certificate of occupancy until they submit the report. So something might have to be corrected if it doesn't meet it. But that multifamily, they have to test individual units, and they don't have to test every single unit, but they have to test a certain percentage of units. That's but it's either there's already energy code compliance report required to get a building permit. Yeah. It's just a different method. But they use software. They both use software.
The Hearst rating is not a new part of the process, right? It's already in the stretch.
Okay.
Yeah.
This doesn't add any additional inspection costs to the process.
There's something above and beyond what the building inspector is willing or capable of doing. I don't know if it's capable of. They just sort of dish that off, saying, I want to defer that to somebody else. It's a problem.
Yeah, well, the building inspectors aren't certified to be Hearst raters, so they rely upon, just like on a commercial building, the building department relies upon the architects and engineers' stamps on their drawings. As far as the testing on a bigger building, they're going to have to do a lot more than just a Hearst rating kind of thing. They're going to have to do commissioning on the equipment and so forth. So all of that is good for the big buildings anyway. And like, for example, like schools today, they all follow this process anyway. So.
Sorry.
So did that start to answer your question? Do you have more questions? Because now I have many questions about this.
So wondering about a little bit about commercial buildings. Is that a certain size commercial buildings, or what? I don't know the I can't read the size that.
Yeah, no. So this slide is an attempt to boil down several slides I've seen, so it's a little more digestible. And one of the places where I redacted details on the commercial. So there's actually multiple classes of commercial with slightly different requirements. The variations more on the stretch code side. So if we wanted to, I don't know if this is the right place, but I can give you two slides that sort of expand this into two slides worth with a whole second.
I want to curiosity. And then the other question was, with municipal use buildings.
Yeah.
So, new school, for instance, things like that.
So I think I will just find the slide. So roughly speaking, it fits under that those commercial rows. Schools get their own specific tweaks.
The one thing about these also is like, I think as Alex mentioned, is the operating expenses are a lot different for buildings that are built to these standards. I have a client where we designed basically a net zero, and he said he doesn't really have to run his heat in the winter months because of the construction. You've got the solar panel too, but it doesn't really right there, Dick? And we've had other clients in multifamilies where they've said that because, if you think about like commercial buildings, you only have so much exposure depending upon how complicated the building design is, but only so many exterior exposures. So the more complex the design, the more complex and difficult it is to get all that air sealing done. But the energy efficiency. So for example, in a municipal building, your operating expenses should be less than they would have been for something, let's say, built in this era.
Does a municipal building have to meet the same code as a commercial building? Or is it?
I understood it does, but is that true, Josh?
Municipal buildings seem to get a pass on a number of different things, but I don't know if that's true.
I think roughly, yes, they're in that social bucket.
To add another acronym at you, TEDI is the sort of metric that they use as opposed to HERS or FIAS, which is the passive house standard. But fire stations, libraries, police stations, post offices, town halls, and offices are all in the same sort of TEDI thresholds. Those thresholds are usually not by use in this case, but by square footage. So larger buildings have a different rating than.
That's only new buildings, right?
And yes, and the specialized code, to be really, really, really clear, is only new buildings. So that's the only thing that is changing at time.
So is it worth going through this slide in detail, or? I think more knowing that the resources there is probably.
So you're going to be doing, I understand, organizing a public kind of presentation, right?
Yes. Do you want to, Alex, finish your slides before we talk about next steps, or
you just see what's left here? So yeah, there was a return to the key points here, just to resurface. This is new construction only. It's about encouraging electrification, not mandating it. This it's not reasonable to mandate all electric in Milton at this time. Preserving choice so that as the economics of electricity versus fossil fuels shift, that people can take advantage of that without super expensive projects and the cost of it.
I will add that Boston adopted the specialized code, so all of the commercial, institutional, etc. And the city and its approval processes have been requiring all electric buildings, such as laboratory buildings. So pretty complex buildings, and the design teams have been able to make that all electric. So it's not impossible. So when you talk about just where the state is heading with it.
One of the things that
the more people are doing it, the faster it becomes the norm, and then the pricing also follows that it's just standard practice. Sorry.
One of the things that I've been focused on since I spoke to the warrant committee was looking into schools that are being built, have been built in the last few years, are being built nearby. Which way are they going? And they are I think there's data which I can share that the construction cost premiums have generally been 0 or less than 1%, and then that was before sort of a wave of generous incentives. Where now I think people are finding that building all electric geothermal heating and solar is actually the lowest cost way to even construct the building, and then the operating costs are dramatically less. So it's just a financially wise thing to do. Acton and Cambridge have built net zero schools in the last few years. It found that was the lowest cost construction option. I think Westwood is wrapping one up.
Watertown is halfway through.
So I very quickly found about 30 people who had experience building an all-electric school who were willing to say good things about it.
Our previous environmental coordinator, Mira Patel, works for a sustainability design firm and is working with Somerville Public Schools to do electrification.
Now, and again, this code doesn't require the school to be all electric. Just pointing out that it's not,
So I think I understand the pros for this. Mm-hmm. What are the cons? Why wouldn't people do this?
What sort of? Well, I think there is additional construction cost up front, right? So I think that there are concerns about its impact on housing affordability. I think there's evidence, good evidence that is more than made up for by reduced operating costs. In many cases, incentives will reduce the overall construction cost too. So but I think it would be silly to say that there's no case in which somebody's not going to end up.
No, I'm just saying, you have to bring this. You want to bring this before the town meeting in May. I mean, that's just sort of the date. So you're going to have, obviously, the questions are going to come up. That okay, you told me it's not going to cost any more money, really, or if it does cost more money up front, then that after a fact is going to be equal to or less than where I am right now. So what would
I think there will always be exceptions to that. With any complex change, like somebody's going to get in a situation.
I don't mean anything idiosyncratic. I'm talking about things that what would be the objection against something like this?
I can tell you what I've heard. I don't find them convincing.
That's okay. That's not for us to decide.
Yeah.
I'm just interested in what the.
So I think one fear is that there is a process by which the codes are updated every 3 years, and we can't know with any certainty what will be in future code updates. So when we adopted the stretch code, we adopted it with language that automatically took on any updates to the stretch code. And that's why in July 2024, the updates to the stretch codes will apply in Milton regardless of any town vote.
Right.
And so it's exactly the same with the specialized adopting code. There's language that says adopt the code as written and any updates that may be.
So Alex, I think for Milton, where so much already built, a lot of people, the construction permits, if you look on a percentage basis, are probably renovations and additions, which this wouldn't apply to, right?
Well, so the concern I heard at the Warren Committee was, what if they change the specialized adopting code to not just apply to new construction? Which I suppose is possible.
Who's they?
The Warren Committee.
No. Who would
they being the state of Massachusetts or the International Energy Code Committee?
Yeah, so the
consortium. There's too many C's, too many E's.
I thought that, like in the case of the opt-in, didn't the governor have to sign off on it?
On creating the third code tier. Yes. I think now exists and gets updated on a cadence like the other one.
I think what Dick was saying, if this comes before town meeting, there's going to be a lot of talk, as with everything, fake news and whatever. And a number of people are going to come up and say, I had to pay so much more money for my addition or for my new porch or whatever because of the energy code. And it's going to be some kind of a speed bump or hurdle to overcome.
Yeah.
And, examples of who's done it already. So we're not pioneers here. We're actually following all these other towns. And that's the kind of crucial evidence, I think, to be able to demonstrate that, yeah, it's going to cost more money either way. But this way, you're controlling some of your costs and you're doing.
I like to, I think what I often see in activist communities is they want to minimize the fears. And I do think fears can be overblown. It's easy to inject some misinformation in this, but it's also wrong to say there's no risks at all associated with transition in the energy system. Right?
That goes back to the misinformation. You have to get it both ways. That's why you have to have a pretty good.
So as somebody who's very strongly in favor of this push for electrification, let me tell you what worries me about it. Right? It is not a foregone conclusion that doubling the capacity of the electric grid over 20 years is going to go smoothly at all times. It just isn't. Like I think we have always depended on the utility is not a capitalist free market, right? It's always been a centrally managed, very bureaucratic thing, and it still is. But they're taking it very seriously. I personally think that I'd rather have a big change going on the utility so that it attracts the kind of people who are working on big changes rather than sort of treating it like the tea and let's just keep it the same for another century and see what happens. But there's risks there, right? And then relying on electricity for all the things, what if there's a power outage?
Exactly.
So,
well, there's also the transmission system, right? It's vulnerable in places, right? In terms of the power outages with you. And that's one of the things that, some places where like we have the transmission above ground and in poles amongst trees and all of that, right? And the more severe weather events that we have now, it does put some of it at risk, right? But the tighter homes, like I said about the client of ours who doesn't need to turn the heat on, at least it's safe on that.
That's why efficiency is such a.
Well, yeah, I agree. I just think that this seems to be such a topical situation that we're going to be hopefully you'll be talking about in May. That I think that looking at past events and not to be a precursor of what could happen in the future, is that I think we're all better off having factual pros and factual cons as opposed to getting into this misinformation trope that we can get involved in.
So you're going to make me bring up that risk.
No, listen, I just said I was just spent 2 weeks with a good friend of mine who's in the solar energy business. So I get all the good stuff. And when we sit down, I said, what if you have a solar eclipse that goes for 6 months type of thing? What happens then? But
we're already seriously exposed to those kinds of risks.
I've had an all-electric house for 26 years here in Milton. And we had old heat. We took out the old oil heat when we bought the house and we put in electric heat pumps back then. And they weren't as good as the heat pumps that we have now. There was probably one winter when it was down to 6 degrees and inside it was kind of cool. But everything else, so like we upgraded our electrical service to now have on-demand hot water, to have electric vehicle charging and induction cooktop, et cetera. But so it's even possible in a home that was built in the 1950s where you're not tearing it apart to bring all of these upgrades in.
Sure, you're preaching to the choir on that. I mean, I think that's the whole idea.
Yeah.
My mother had the first solar panel on a house in Milton in the 70s. So I get all the good stuff. I'm just saying that as we go forward, I think this is a very interesting topic. You made a great presentation. I'm just trying to get a little bit ahead of ourselves, saying that if it goes to the town meeting, which I hope it does, that the conversation is, listen, if you're going to do it, here's all the information you need. I'm just seeing what could happen, but I think this is the best thing.
Yeah. And just to speak to that risk of power outages, I just mentioned the all-electric school in Westwood. It's an all-electric net zero school. But my friend from Sustainable Milton, who's a good and says hi to people, he said he was there sort of looking around on the day that they were installing the natural gas backup generator. So you can have fossil fuel backup generation in an all electric building. It's just that it's not being used on a daily basis.
Well, there aren't so many houses in town that aren't all electric right now anyway. Because even if you have natural gas, you can't start that furnace, or you can't light your stove, or you can't have hot water unless you have a spark. And the spark comes from the electric grid. It doesn't come from a lighter. It might have come from a lighter back in 1970.
You can still do it, but you don't want to do it.
Yeah, but to be completely fair, it takes. You could get that spark with a 5 kilowatt gas generator. It's a little harder if it's.
Right. Yeah, but I think
you can do it like that battery if you want a workaround, but still, right now, the whole town of Milton and many other towns pretty much been dependent upon an all electric scenario.
I think most of us are without heat if the electricity's out.
Yeah.
In the status quo.
Yeah.
It's a mixed fuel just to avoid the misnomering of all electric being not using that sort of on-site combustion outside of generators.
But it's a risk that we've all been taking for the last 25 or 30 years since we got rid of pilot lights.
So rather than trying to sort of paper over the risks of doing this, I'd just like to emphasize that there are risks of not doing it too.
That's right.
So if you look at how the state is managing the utilities and kind of going all in on electrification and actively putting boundaries on investments in the natural gas infrastructure, even under a sort of low electrification scenarios. I have a slide on this. Natural gas prices are expected to rise significantly in the coming decades. So if you're stuck with a natural gas furnace or a $10,000 renovation to upgrade your electrical service, you're kind of in a bind. And we're talking about buildings that will be constructed in 2025 and beyond. It'd be a shame, knowing what we know today, to sort of put the residents of those new buildings in that situation. And that's ignoring the, my background is in climate science. That's how I got hooked on this decades ago. And there's not very effective discussion in the media, I'd say. There's all this talk of 1.5 and 2 degrees C, but it does sound like, I'll just turn the thermostat a little bit. What that really relates to is the kind of abrupt, irreversible, and very large changes that can happen as warming proceeds beyond those thresholds. So, I do think there's some uncertainty. Is it 1.5? Is it 2? Is it 2.5? Like, I have hope that even if these projects, these transitions take a decade longer than we'd like them to, that there's still plenty of hope. I also think that if you set a goal for 2050 and you don't get started, it's going to be 2100.
Yeah.
So I think that this kind of small low-hanging fruit, it really just applies to new construction, relatively low cost impact, and only to non-residents who don't live here yet. Should be not the most controversial thing that comes out of the climate.
Talk to me in May, all right?
That's my hope.
So Alex, I was wondering, I know that like California had rolling blackouts for quite some time, and they have done a lot of energy efficiency.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is, if all of the towns are all doing this, I know you had alluded to the fact that, they're going to get prepared and so forth. Yeah. But my concern is, you look at a state like California that's been doing a lot of energy efficiency for a long time. And they
energy efficiency or electrification?
Both. When I was in California, I was with the Sierra Club. I convinced San Francisco. I was part of the team that convinced San Francisco to adopt an all-electric building ordinance. we did, it's called reach codes, it's supposed to stretch codes across the state, but the flat codes are largely driven by the inefficiencies in the system and wildfires. That's what we see as the primary drivers, at least from us.
Okay. How is Massachusetts getting prepared for this? Because if all of these towns are looking at things like this, I'm just sort of wondering how quickly they're going to be brought up to speed to handle this if towns are doing all of this.
Yeah. So
we don't have a problem.
Like I said, I wouldn't tell you that there's no risks of hiccups in a transition of this size. And I think that if they happen, the state will have no choice but to carve out alternatives, right? Like because what will happen is you'll go for an interconnection for a 400 amp service, and Eversource will say, we can't do that for you for 28 months because there's no backup on this transition, right? And if there's a sufficient volume of that, I don't think the state could just sit there and forget it, we're not billing anything. I sort of think that reasonable minds would prevail. Eversource has filed plans to increase grid capacity by 180% to support these scenarios, and they are working on it.
Yeah. Good job.
Regina, do you have any questions?
Nope, I'm all set.
Okay.
Building codes for one night. Right? Should I
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yes, if you want to briefly talk about the climate action planning committee, just what you're sort of up to, if you will, and then what your timeline is.
Yes, I'll do my best there. I think we're still working that out. Yeah. Okay. So start with the charge. The climate action planning committees was authorized in I think January of last year and started meeting in June with a charge to develop a climate action plan that identifies the sort of necessary actions to reduce Milton's sort of townwide greenhouse gas emissions in alignment with the targets set by the 2021 law. So it's 50% by 2030, 75% by 2040, and net zero by 2050. Reminder. And to
50% off of the.
Yeah, sorry, that's the words. So the charge, which is linked, and I'll make this document available to you guys. The charge gives those details. It's 1990 baseline.
Oh, my goodness.
Right. So we are on the way. I don't know if 50% by 2030 is looking great, but we're certainly not at zero. We're meant to be looking at greenhouse gas emissions reductions, but also mitigating climate risks, energy efficiency, and renewable energy deployment in general. To do this by soliciting public input from experts, stakeholders, and residents, and ultimately to prepare a written plan. I think the charge says for consideration by town meeting. I'm a little unclear still on what the right kind of endorsement of a plan like this is. Obviously, it'll have recommendations in it that themselves require, something like the specialized code, which has to go to town meeting. I don't think putting it in a plan is a commitment to do it, right? When it might cost money, so I'm not sure exactly what the endpoint is for a plan like this, but certainly back to the select board for review and approval, and then once the plan is in place to measure and facilitate the implementation and progress of the climate action. Any questions about this? So here's my best effort at high level timelines. As I said, we started meeting in June. The first 2 or 3 months, we were getting organized and figuring out like what topic areas are we focusing on, who's doing what does success look like, and from July through September, we were generating a research outline, like what are the major categories of emissions that we need to reduce? What are the major categories of risk that we need to learn about and research? And we developed sort of very short sort of key action proposals or straw proposals, something more specific than let's solve climate, that we could take around to people who might be involved in implementing those actions and start to get feedback. So since the beginning of this year, we have been taking those sort of key action recommendations to have sort of small one-on-one or small group discussions with experts and stakeholders. So, for example, Arthur Doyle is focusing on waste, solid waste, and he set up a meeting with the DPW to explore emissions reductions opportunities in our solid waste programs. So I think that kind of sort of one-on-one outreach, meeting with people who know a thing or two about some specific thing that we're considering incorporating in the plan, I feel like that has begun, and we'll just have to keep doing that forever. I think some of our earlier plans put end dates on that, and now that I'm doing it, I don't feel like that's ever going to be completed. So, that's an ongoing thing.
Some parallels with the.
Never complete.
As a brand new committee chair who's taking it till he makes it, I welcome any advice from this group about how not to get lost in the details. So we're working towards starting a sort of broad-based community engagement. I think at the beginning, that would be more focused on building awareness of the fact that the committee exists, what kind of things we're working on, making sure people know how to contact us if they want to, and then getting a draft plan written so that we can get into more like action item based public feedback by sort of the third quarter of this year. I think by the end of this year, we want to have a plan that we can bring back to the select board and start that kind of more formal process of review and feedback, hopefully leading to an endorsement, and then transition into the implementation phase, whatever.
We did 9 years ago.
I think we have a lot of challenges to figure out. Many of the things would require at least staff to oversee them. I think there's some really cool opportunities around helping residents access the financial incentives that are available for electrification. To have successful projects is a pretty steep learning curve. I just went through replacing my oil boiler with heat pumps, and it made sense financially, but only after I thought about it for like 2 years. So it's certainly not an easy path today, and I think that the town could really help with making the information available, helping people connect with reputable installers, so that if people are doing these things that need to happen for the state to meet its climate goals, that like they're having a successful experience and they're not getting heat pumps that don't work, because that's not going to be good for the overall effort. It's not good for the residents as well.
So this is going to be ongoing, though, regardless of whether we adopt not the stretch code, the
Specialized.
That's right.
So the town meeting for the specialized code is sort of like free advertising. You either make it or you don't, but either way, you're you've got the podium a little bit to speak about the pros and the cons and hear the cons so that you can then use that.
That's right.
For the next sales pitch, I guess is.
But I think I definitely view this warrant article as an opportunity to make a good impression and not burn a bunch of bridges trying to just win at all costs. Right. Because this is just the first of many things. If serious concerns are raised at town meeting and it doesn't go our way this year, there's always next year that we can spend more time to resolve the problems that are identified.
One thing to think about with timing is all of the, I don't know of how many of the large 40B projects have applied for their building permits yet. What would the time frame be for enforcement or effective when? If it was adopted in or approved in May, it's not in effect until December. Yeah.
So it's less than 6 months, and then it could either be July 1 or January 1 after that for the specialist.
I see a lot.
I remember Campbell's Lawn had her hand raised. I don't know if it's still raised. But.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to Alex for raising the point that making this decision is both challenging and signing on with reputable folks is an obstacle too. Having just completed a heat pump project myself, I consider myself a pretty informed person when it comes to climate and when it comes to being able to access resources. And yet it still was a real uphill slog. And now going through the process of adding solar panels to our house, same thing. I think I'm probably still maybe a year out from being able to complete that project just because of how opaque the process can be and how challenging it is to feel comfortable with the decision-making process of who to go with and how to make things happen. And also if you are making decisions between loans and other things. So thank you. I just want to thank you for acknowledging the challenge that there are good people out there who want to do this stuff and that it's more than just, hitting a button.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think I think of it in terms of sort of technology adoption curves. And I feel like heat pumps are where Tesla was, 8 or 9 years ago, where it's still kind of off the beaten path, right? And so the important thing over the next few years is to make sure that the people who are motivated to do that have a great report, right? Because it's about generating community around it, generating positive word of mouth. That most people are gonna do this because all their neighbors have done it. Exactly. Right? Like that's where you get into the steep part of the S curve, and trying to push into that part of the transition too quickly, you're just gonna lose buy-in because it's an expensive project to have go awry.
Does the state subsidize any education for technicians or installers for engineers? Because one of the problems I found in my end of work is that all these great ideas are great as long as they're just ideas, because as soon as you try to implement it, the supply chain gets all bogged down with, we've got the unit, we have nobody to install it, or we've got the installer but no units, and then people lose faith because they've been stuck and they hear their neighbor got stuck, so I'm never going to touch that.
Yeah. So I think workforce development is a big part of the state's roadmap as well. We need more electricians, more HVAC technicians. I got to say that while I was having my heat pumps put in, I had no fewer than 12 HVAC guys in my house. Like really? Day after day, like different ones, not all at the same time. Usually like 3 at a time, but like
I have some put in. I didn't have. I guess I was lucky then.
And they're all super professional, young men with a great job, you know, but I think that people make a good, I mean, part of people kept leaving the company while I was getting the projects set because I think there's demand and so people are hopping around and getting raises. And, so it's good work for the upcoming generation.
The Mass Clean Energy Center does do a lot in terms of that workforce development training and doing the tracking of that. I think they found about just shy of 50,000 sort of folks working in this kind of space doing communication work. But they did say awareness of those jobs as both some people who want to go into that field and people who know that they exist as a resource.
But you're right. Every single person in Milton tried to answer the call today and try to get a heat pump done this year.
Right.
There would not be minutes. And so, right, I think this is one of those things where we have to get started. We have to go as fast as we can, but not faster because.
How did Mass Save interface with this, or does it?
Mass Save offers
the rebate. That's what I use.
Yeah. And so that's one of the things I personally like to work on through the Climate Action Planning Committee is electrification programs. There's models to follow in towns like Lexington and Wayland. They are town-led programs that offer a range of services around this. Heat pump coaching is one, like volunteer. Usually some like town staff person manages a team of resident volunteers who have done a project or, you know, engineers sort of interested and want to help their neighbors be successful. I actually, back in 2020, worked with a heat pump coach from Wayland who came and nerded out on spreadsheets while he was trying to get his practice launched. And now they're more focused on licensing. But that's a model that is there to follow. I think it would realistically require some budget and staff to oversee it, although there's also grant programs. I think the Lexington program has one full-time sustainability director and the grant funded by the Mass Save Community Outreach Grants for a part-time outreach coordinator.
Tim and I interviewed and met with the Building Electrification Accelerator, which is a sort of statewide initiative. And I talked about what it would take to launch an energy coaching program in Milton. And for us, the hurdle is staff capacity to manage that stuff. The sustainability coordinator would be potentially get us over that hump.
So that was one of our first, my first stakeholder and expert conversations was to sit down with Nick Milano and mention stuff like this. And now I guess we're in line, right? There's a few other folks who've been waiting longer for staff meetings. So.
Staffing is always going to be an issue.
We have to start somewhere.
You have to start. You know, win the lottery, get a buy a ticket, right?
Are there any scheduled opportunities to talk to people? I think this was one of the things I had asked. Are there going to be any forums or anything for people to learn more about the code? I'm thinking more like the contractors, the homeowners, things like that.
About the code?
About this potential new change and about what's existing, because I think some people don't understand what's like that we're going to increase even more naturally, so like just like you explained today.
Yeah.
So is there any upcoming informational session or anything, Josh? Or?
Yeah, we're planning on April 4th with roughly similar content. I would really like to record video content. It's that you can watch faster than you can watch a public forum to try to get these messages available in more channels.
So that forum is Thursday, the 4th of April. It's at 6:30 at the Council on Aging. Alex and I will be there, as will Building Commissioner Joe Achu, as will our environmental coordinator. And Alex has touched base with Dylan Patel at DOER, so regional liaison. and he might be there as well to talk about it. But as Alex said, there'll be some more time spent clarifying what the stretch code is versus the specialized code and what the stretch code means regardless of what happens at town meeting.
How is this getting advertised?
Well, we only set up a date on Friday. So
Do you have any recommendations, Beth?
yeah, I post things to the town Facebook and Twitter, and I think it gets about 3 sort of hits and views and engagements. So, you know,
I just shared the East Milton planning session with MAPC, 3 different Facebook pages today. So I think if people can do that. But the other
Get on the big Facebook groups and not the town one.
Yeah, get on like everything Milton. I mean, if you put it through the town one, I share it when it comes out on a planning board initiative, I share it on those other groups that I know will have a bigger draw. But I just post just share exactly with no commentary exactly what they're posting.
yeah.
Could be in the Times.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
Genevieve St. Julie's been really good about coming to our microgrid stuff, to CAPC work. The Sustainable Milton newsletter is pretty big. And we've been working with them all to get that out to their body. And since it's an event at the COA, we typically work with Katie O'Brien to get out on the COA newsletter.
Just go to the town too.
Well, I was just gonna say
Because I think like it's great to have a newspaper, but it is like a paid service. Like, is there free, like people can sign up and get email notifications through the town?
But do they?
there is.
There is, like, I'm signed up for like certain committees.
Right, certain things you can.
But not like a general.
And then on the front page, of the website too.
Yeah, so we do news items. And if you are subscribed to that, you'll get that sent to you. The news. But
I think those are the people who are already engaged.
yeah, we don't see that typically reaching folks that wouldn't have already reached. And it's all, we don't have like a manual, like the Milton monthly newsletter that we curate and send out to every home in town.
Is there any way to target town meeting members?
Well, the clerk will send an email
Invitation?
with an invitation because it's going to be a town meeting article.
Yeah.
You ask
Like
her,
they
she will.
definitely need to know the most, and then I think town meeting members are likely to have a network of neighbors that.
Especially if it comes out just instead of like a notice just saying, hey, here's an invitation, please forward to your neighbors. And this is designed for town meeting members, but we would love everybody to participate. Because my wife's a town meeting member, she gets these things that are very official looking notices, but by the time you're done reading it, what's it's really all about? It doesn't get to the heart of it. Whereas I think an advertisement that was written as an email, as an invite, might be more effective because it would encourage people to distribute it to your friend group.
So when we had the webinar for the Milton Village zoning in 2020, we asked the clerk to send an email out. And the email was short, but it at least made every town meeting member aware. And the same happened for the MBTA communities, the public forum that Tim and Josh did for that was an invitation was sent out to all town meeting members. So definitely.
How do you contact the town meeting members? What's that?
The town clerk sends out.
Because as a resident, I couldn't contact my town meeting member by email.
No.
I know. It's
you are
the clerk. It's the clerk.
Thank you, Josh. I appreciate that.
He didn't know.
It's elected. You were always welcome. Just checking, no, but I appreciate that update. But no, I mean, I was just wondering in terms of getting in touch with the town meeting members, if I wanted to get in touch with this after this presentation, and if I wanted to get in touch with my town meeting members, I'd have to write them a letter.
Yes.
And well, the clerk has offered that people can opt into having their email address available, but it's still a process that requires someone to send the email, right? I mean, I forgotten exactly how the system works.
What is
I thought it was,
it?
it goes to all the
Yeah.
seven. It's like like I'm checking for precinct 7.
Right.
You can send it to all, and it gets into like a district group for an individual.
So the top would be like
Because there's also things about the deliberation and it's not just an easy.
You know, this basically would come to me.
The other thing is you can have something
Then come to me.
in the, like in the
So it wouldn't
building
be
department, so it would be.
me directly. So if I didn't want to open up emails from
You know, maybe
to people from the town of Milton, I'd be
like
open.
different places.
So that's what we do typically. That's what we did.
But the
for-
building department would be good because that's where your contractors are going.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, the building department should have its own notices about the changes in the stretch code, because they don't want the builders to come in and file for a permit on August 1st and be surprised, you know?
Yeah. I can tell you, like, that change is happening across the state. Builders and contractors have had a ton of outreach from the state on that, and as business owners or business people are obviously interested in this, and I strongly doubt that our contractors out there aren't aware of these requirements, and they certainly won't be once they change.
I mean, I think there's enough complexity in what's specialized, what's stretch, that even though they know it's coming, because they haven't actually had to go through the compliance process yet, there's still some confusion about what it's exactly going to mean.
There's definitely, there's different pathways. You know, you can use a certain kind of insulation, or you can use a different method of doing your insulation. It's not, I mean, it's one thing to give it, to say, here's the number, but to actually achieve the number, it's all, the devil's in the details. And you've got to show where every bit of, all of your sealant is going. So yes, it's true, because architects have been made aware of these things too. But it's still, until you're doing it on part of your day-to-day practice as the builders and as the architect, is still some learning to how it's best applied to a specific project. So I do think the builders are going to, you know, have a little bit of a learning curve still. Because it's one thing at a high level, it's another thing at the detail level.
Well, I think the cost will be, granted, in the long run, it will be a good thing, but I think as a consumer, the cost will be more upfront, I think, you know, potentially. So I think the homeowners, you know, would be interested in this as well.
I think one thing is, like I said earlier, until when you have a new, basically a new practice, and the construction industry, like when air barriers and air, you know, sort of house wrap air barriers first came into being, there was, you don't think of it now because it's just standard practice, but that was like, how do you get that done? You know, how do you make sure that's getting done properly? And on the commercial side, there was a lot of uproar about it, and there had to be a lot of inspections. Now it's just standard practice. There'll just be something like that. It'll just be a little bit of a curve for everyone, and maybe some contractors will want to charge a little more at the beginning because they're not as familiar with it. But once they and all their subcontractors, that's their standard practice, it'll be a different, just like Tesla or other new technologies. It's going to be that way here too.
Yeah, just to speak to resources and outreach, because we've given 4-5 presentations between the two of us at this point on the subject. All of our presentations are on the town website. You're in community. We have all the resilience and sustainability. It's stretch energy codes. That has all the presentations we've given, including the one I gave to the select board and the planning board that has DOER's breakdown of the costs for electric versus gas construction under the code for both small and large buildings. Under the stretch code, builders typically see $20,000 to about $30,000 in savings, and homeowners see about $550 in a large building and just over $1,000 in a small building, based off of this study that I shared to the planning board and select board. So just to do a cost point.
That's awesome.
I originally wanted to keep the focus on the specialized code when I was first starting to put materials together, because it's like, oh, well, the stretch code's not affected by this vote, so why talk about it? I changed my mind because it's a good opportunity to just let people know about that it affects them. It's related to this warrant article. As long as we make it clear how people vote on the warrant article doesn't affect whether that happens or not. It's a good opportunity to give people information, to give them an opportunity to not be surprised at the last minute.
Yeah, I think one of the challenging things about the stretch code that's just come into practice in the last year is that if you have an existing home and you're doing a renovation or an addition, if you can't isolate the addition, you're required to bring the whole thing, your whole house, the existing part up to code. And that can be a big expense for someone who's not planning to do that. So that I see as one of the more, it's in the stretch code now, so it's not as.
What does isolate mean?
Well, let's just say you had an area where you could kind of close it off, either with doors or, so when they do the testing, you're not drawing in the kind of air from the existing house. So that's what I mean by isolated. But let's just say you're doing an addition where you're opening up rooms to one another, and the flow of space and everything it means that you couldn't sort of shut the new off from the old. Then you're going to be required to bring the whole thing, your whole house, up to energy code.
Is it 1,000 square feet or more?
Yeah, I thought that was the trigger.
Yeah, that's the trigger. Yeah.
So if it's a smaller home, it's also more than 50% of the building sort of footprint. If that is less than 1,000, so it's like a 1,800 square foot home, it would be triggered by that instead.
So it's really, I think it's just sort of setting expectations for people when they're beginning to think about what their renovation plans are or their expansion plans are. A small addition is not going to trigger it, but if it did get triggered, you're looking at windows, you're looking at insulation, you're looking at a lot of things. So it's, but it's all if it can be incremental in terms of when we need to bring the whole building up, it's better. All right, so thank you, Alex. Any other questions? Regina?
Thank you.
Okay.
Nope, I'm all set.
Alex, on the 21st. Your next CAPC meeting, it's on the 21st of March. If you are Jones in the scene before they pull.
And you can always just reach out to me. It's been Milton.org.
Yeah, thanks for all the work you're doing.
Good night, everybody.
Yes.
Thanks, Alex.
And tomorrow night, the select board agenda item 14 is on the renewal of our community electricity aggregation program. I've sent some details to Alex about that. They presented to us the other week, but that's another sort of energy efficiency, green energy component. Sort of makeup that is on the agenda.
Is that something that you have a chance of opting out of or something?
Yeah.
Well, you can always choose to not be in the CEA and opt into either by default, you're in Milton Green. You can opt up to 100 or down to Milton Basic, or you could go for general Eversource. The savings have been significant, about $1,400 a person or a household since the program started, and just over $9.5 million a town. What we're expecting to see sort of in a big sort of way is that it'll stay the same generally, but Milton Basic will move from 10% additional class 1 RECs to 20% additional.
Wow.
So we opted into the 100% last year, and I just was finally able to download and get our tax deduction amount. So I still have to go back and compare all of our numbers, but it is interesting too when you look and see where they're getting the clean energy from, or the renewable energy from. When you go to that website where you actually get the tax information, they have a lot of information. So the town website has certain information, but then So like a nonprofit. This was a little bit unclear to me when we were first doing it, but there's another place, another entity that you actually get the tax information.
Yeah, so Good Energy
Yeah.
is the group that manages it, and they manage it for most of the CEAs across the Commonwealth. And actually, then there's a whole sort of supplemental green municipal aggregation program that makes sure these are fund reps. But in terms of also nonprofits that are doing great work on this, Sustainable Milton has a how-to guide on green your energy on how to opt out to Green 100, which Alex and I put together.
That's awesome. Used to be part.
All right.
No.
So I think, Josh, you're going to work on the sustainability part of our report, okay?
Yeah, no,
It's already written.
Don't I know mechanically how to write it, but I'm here to be responsible for it.
Okay. Excuse me. So let's just go quickly back to next meeting dates, since I skipped those earlier. Do these dates work for everyone?
I think the 13th might be second week of town meeting, and we don't know.
We don't know.
Well, I mean,
I think we're going to go along.
I don't know yet, but usually it's, Monday, Tuesday, and then it's usually Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and then, the following Monday, Tuesday. So, because it's the 6th is the first night.
So this is kind of why I was getting.
May.
Yes, not the May one, not the April.
What's the April date again?
Yeah. So given our schedule, well, all right, we can come back to that. If it does get pushed to May 20th, then we're going to have a bit of time in between meetings. But so that we could hold the 13th and always switch it to the 20th, right? If 13th would work. Meeting minutes. Thank you, Josh, for putting those together. Did anybody have any comments about the minutes? So, sorry, what was the date of that?
February 12th.
February 12th, okay. So then I'll take a
I'll
motion.
make a motion to accept the meeting minutes of February 12th.
I'll second.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, since Regina's remote, we'll do a roll call. Regina?
I'm in favor.
Tabor?
I'm in favor.
Elaine? Dick?
Yes.
Roxanne?
Yes.
And Cheryl, yes. You just gave us an update, Josh, on the meeting, a couple of meetings. Do you have any further updates for us?
Do I? Hard to keep everything that might be relevant. But if it was really important, I would be remembering it right now. So I think I've given you my update.
Okay, thank you. All right. I'm going to go.
Yeah. Yes. March 25th. Cheryl alluded to it, but the that's a Monday, 2 weeks from now. Us and our planning consultant MAPC are having our second community forum about the East Union Square mixed-use overlay zoning. So that'll be at the Art Center at 7 o'clock, as it was last time.
That's what I shared today. I shared it.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah.
If you're ever looking at the town meeting, the public meetings calendar, it's the featured event on the top corner. I couldn't log into Twitter today, so it's not on Twitter, but it's on Facebook.
What's the date again?
The 25th, 2 weeks from today.
At the Art Center?
7 at the Art Center.
All right, thank you, Josh. All right, I'm going to go to 8 for at least a piece of this. I was offered the opportunity to tomorrow's select board meeting. So I put 2 options together for us. We've talked about this a couple of times, and we haven't really talked about whether we think we need an extension or how we plan to make recommendations for an update. So the first one that I put together was to add 1 year to the committee. And that would give us time to follow up on, if we needed it, to follow up on anything further with the library or town center planning. And if there was anything else, as we try and finalize these recommendations that we thought we wanted to have a little bit more follow-up before we submit our report. So that was the sort of first page of this. And then the other piece was just to add to the list of sort of expertise that somebody could have given empty seats, you know, and this has come up before that maybe we should expand the kinds of, I guess, experiences that people have for members of the committee. So that's the first one. The second one was whether we wanted to think about the committee just having an expanded charge to do the update ourselves. So that would be an addition of another year or 2 years for the committee. So I open it up to discussion.
I think your first point is, I think it's kind of problematic. I think it's far as expanding the charge with this existing committee, especially since 3 of us were here for the last one. It doesn't give the town or other people the opportunity to have serious input other than that.
We could all step down though.
Well, I mean, that's wrong. I'm not suggesting that we all have to step down right away. I'm thinking it's kind of time for the newer concerns, and I think that the implementation of it was good. We've done some things and taken a fair number of those things off the board. But I would say that there are probably some things on the old master plan that maybe aren't even relevant now, and therefore maybe some of those should come off, and people have got new ideas. And I'm not so sure that we, as a committee, should influence the new ideas too much. It's just, we should probably give advice after the new committee has said, these are the things we really think are important.
So the thought about it was that we're going to make these recommendations because of what we've talked about with bringing all these folks together. So is it going to be somebody else that's starting from scratch, not having heard what everybody else just told us over this last year? It's not to say that you wouldn't bring new people into the committee, and then, would a new committee take a long time to get formed and up to speed? If it would have to go to town meeting, would that be like next year that it would get formed because it would be a next May town meeting? So I guess I was thinking maybe there's some efficiency to having it be just a slightly different charge, since we're not recommending a wholesale rewrite. We're recommending just some portions. Other thoughts?
How often are we supposed to do a master plan?
Well, it was 10 years for this, right? So
is it time to do another 10-year master plan? At that time would be a logical.
It could, well, like we talked about it can be either a wholesale, like remember this one was this one that we've been working on was wholesale because it hadn't been updated since the 1970s.
That's right. But I think there's a lot of new issues I think that have come to bear since we started the original master plan. Going back to the original format of having open meetings, having people just like you did before. We have and we asked them what they thought. It really almost got to the new master plan. I think there's some of the things and the whole thing hanging through. We did a pretty good job with that. Some of the things are still dangling out there that are important to me, like East Milton Square, for example. I think really need some attention. Town center, there's some other things along there. But I think that if we're going to do a new master plan, that might be a good chance to do a real switch to some new people.
Yeah, I guess my concern too is a new master plan. When we did it 10 years ago, was $125,000. We're looking probably at like $200,000. Whether there's going to be funding, we don't have opportunity having an override potentially on the ballot next year. I guess I was a little concerned about a full rewrite, whether there would be ample
Well, it's supposed to be a living document anyway, so we have to really try to figure out how to maybe figure out some of the things that are in there that may be a little antiquated and add in some new issues. We've seen a number of fairly good sized issues come up in the past, 2 or 3 years we never even thought about before. And I think that, having people have an opportunity to weigh in on the master plan. I would like to think everyone knows we have a master plan. I'm not quite so sure that's the case. And I think that people have asked me in the past, how do we input, how do you change the master plan? Is there a way of changing the master plan? I guess we could, as a group, could probably change it, but is that the best way of doing it?
Regina?
Yeah, I guess my big question in terms of whether to go for this idea of a brand new from scratch master plan or sort of an addendum or an update is, have the things that have arisen in the last 10 years, do they fall under completely new categories, or are we talking about, let's say accessory dwelling units or affordable housing as like updates or more critical action items than before? What are the big, huge, inflection points that have really changed over the last 10 years? And that's an honest question, like open question of.
I think we just heard one tonight. I don't remember a lot of conversation regarding sustainability. Right. I know that certainly came up in our conversations, but it wasn't as a pressing issue as it is right now. Accessory dwelling units, even though it wasn't, I don't think it was really totally mentioned in the master plan, offering different types of housing opportunities for residents of Milton, or new residents of Milton, was never really identified, and that could be a whole different conversation. I think that when we came up with the accessory dwelling units in the past, I think it's back with you at the planning board, isn't it?
It was in the housing production plan.
Right, but in terms of that discussion, I don't think was there a vote on it? I'm not sure there was. Escalating up or down on ADUs. It was sent back to the planning board for further study.
It was, but to your earlier point, it is in goal 3 of the master plan.
The ADU?
Amend the accessory apartment bylaw.
Okay. Well, that's something we could talk about again. There's other talk. One of the issues that I think Cheryl and I have talked about is that what do we do with some of these large estates in Milton? Could we do some sort of a condo conversion, a more updated condo conversion type opportunity, as opposed to what we had in the Borough Estates or Clinton Brook? We needed, you needed 1 acre for every unit plus 2, which I thought was absolutely bizarre. But that's what it was. Would that help us with different housing choices, and also deal with some of the 40B situations that we've seen out there, and give owners of properties opportunities to do other things with their property? So I think that there's a number of different things, and of course, then we just had this whole conversation with the MBTA communities law. And how does that work?
So one thing I'm going to answer you about, Regina, is that actually the master plan is doing them, I guess, is established into state law. So there are categories that have to be covered. So that I was looking at this too, back to the charge where it references the chapter 41, section 81D. And so the categories that you find like in the 7 goals, those are the categories. Your plan has to include housing, open space and recreation, public facilities, economic development, transportation. Okay.
That was a pretty good list, though, Cheryl. That was pretty good, I gotta tell you.
Yeah. So so those topics are required, and that's kind of why the master plan is organized around those topics.
Yeah.
Cultural resources.
Yeah. There we go. Paper, you didn't mention that, right? So, actually, I had it right here too, anticipating.
I know.
But as far as like, housing, if you look at sort of planning over the last 20 years, there's some common themes in Milton. The business districts, looking at making them mixed use, looking at our housing options, that, some of these things, like before I was even on the planning board, which is now, I'm about to enter my 10th year. So, condo conversion was something I was working on. I was working on ADUs before this last round. I worked on that probably like 8 years ago. There are things that get brought up and they get this sent back for further study and they kind of just die. And so there's a lot of that in these, in some of these housing initiatives, because zoning changes are hard. They're really hard. So the NPA community. So, they've been put in plans. It's been the housing production plan, which I will point out was approved by the planning board and the select board, is the way that we get a temporary safe harbor on the 40Bs. We make progress on it. So making progress is important. And so the things that are recommended in that plan, including the ADU, but also town-owned property for affordable housing, there identified sites and so the planning board and the select board are responsible for implementing that plan. So, there's some commonalities in the plan that we have. It definitely needs some updates. We've talked about that. That's why we've had people come through. We talked about diversity, equity, and inclusion kind of being rolled into every one of these. Sustainability really being rolled into.
Right, that's what I'm getting at. And I think we have some tremendous, transportation issues, whether it be, I'm not going to talk about the MBT, the traffic. I'm going to talk about just traffic and parking in this town. I mean, if there's another person that talks to me about, the traffic in the town of Milton, I mean, this is one of those things that, I don't. It doesn't solve itself. I mean, I think we need forums like that for people to come in and if it's venting, that's one thing, but also weigh in and try to get some information as to, they can identify what the problem is. We can tell them what the history is and maybe come up with some ideas what the solution should be. Mm-hmm. And I think that was sort of the idea behind the implementation committee. Because
one of the things I think that's important, we saw as the people who joined the meeting early on, is that, initiatives, plans get made, initiatives, the traffic mitigation committee, all these committees that do great work, issue great reports, and then what happens, and I think that's what they've expressed here tonight was a common theme. It's like, what's the implementation? A lot of it has to do with budget and staffing, right? So it's a matter of prioritizing, and it's something, that I think I certainly have felt that the master plan, while it's adopted by the planning board based on this law, it's really something beyond planning board. It's really, the town administrator kind of, because there's town departments at play that the planning board has no control over, like town facilities, right? And so it really is something, if it is a roadmap to how the town evolves over time.
I think it's a realistic roadmap. I think these 4 ladies that came in tonight epitomizes the issue. I mean, they're basically saying, hey, we've been going to a number of meetings. We've talked to a number of people. We don't know where to go. We just want a sidewalk built. And all of a sudden, we're all like, you have to do this, or we have to do that. Maybe you want to do this, and we'll do this. I mean, that's crazy. If you sat down and told someone that's how it worked, they say you were nuts.
Oh, I know.
Right?
And I think part of it, sorry.
No, I'm not here.
I was just going to say, I think part of the issue, though, Dick, is we have a lot of committees. We have, I honestly think we have too many committees in general. And what happens is one committee says one thing, another committee says another thing, nobody talks. We have a strong town administrator. Really, the way it should be done is that it funnels up to the town administrator and he funnels it off to whatever department needs to do it, whether it's the sidewalks or whatever.
Right.
But when you have, this committee and another committee and they're both hearing the same thing and not communicating, that's where the disconnect is, and that's why we have these problems. it's like the right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing at any time, and
I totally agree. And I think that was one of the arguments to have a strong administrator. And I think when we talked about this in the past, when we was on that traffic mitigation committee, and I think it's also a very quick way of having people saying, I'm not going to get involved in committees. It was going to be a waste of time. If nothing's going to happen, you're going to have a hard time getting people to want to donate their time on a regular basis to make this town a better town.
You're talking to those of us who've been on this committee.
No, I'm talking about people in general.
Yeah.
I talk about people in general. We did I'm not going to pick on the traffic mitigation group, but we spent a lot of time on this. And when I was asked, I said, I will not be on this committee if it's just going to sit on the shelf. And so at the end, we had a big fight as to who was going to be in charge of implementation of the report. And it was going to be the town administrator. And that made it pretty simple to me. Give it the town administrator, and he's in charge. He said, listen, I'll take care of it. I'll make sure if it's whoever it is. All right. We're still talking about it. And that was in 2020. All right.
No,
I changed on administrators too.
I know why I know that. Okay. I know. But I'm just saying. So I think that when I'm thinking about just in my own mind, then I'll stop talking about this, is that if it's 10 years, a lot of things have changed in this town, including people. And including issues, and they have that ability to have a forum to listen to what people have to say, what they want to see done in this town. I think it's important to engage, public sentiment and get people in the same room together to talk about mutual issues that are important. They might not agree, but you'll have a pretty good forum, ongoing forum to discuss those types of issues. And that's just my 2 cents.
You were going to speak, Elaine.
Yeah, no, just a couple of things. I think it's late, so sorry if it comes out not perfect, but the community members that came in earlier made me think that I would love to see our committee follow along with projects like that a little more closely in the future. If we do extend it or whoever's on the committee, I just think, that having a pulse on all the different projects that kind of that follow the master plan. So the master plan says we should be doing X, Y, and Z, and this project or this initiative is in line with the plan, then it's maybe following those a little bit closer, in hopes that some of those miscommunications or whatever we might be able to catch or see or whatever. But I think I would love to be able to do that, to see, go through each category and have a better understanding of what's going on in the town and kind of how we can help support those things. As far as the committee and goes in terms of extending and whether we revise, I don't think it's a complete revision. I think it's like you said, to your point, we brought all of these kind of experts in on all the topics and heard from them, and there's definitely revisions. I think we probably all agree that there's revisions. I don't know that there's $120,000 worth of, revision work that needs to take place, but I do think it's worthwhile. I've seen so many different committees reference the town's master plan. It's in the master plan, and it should be, in my opinion, a living document that's changed as things change and in the town as well as the state. And I think to your point, there's probably a lot of other people who might love to get involved in crafting that revision. So my recommendation would be to move forward with, extending the committee, but maybe bringing in a small group to work alongside us as we maybe transition some of that or work with some additional folks to come up with some change.
Yeah, so the actual recommendation would probably want to have a consultant, who would facilitate an update. But I mean, if the board wanted to do it, we could do a similar, the committee wanted to do it, we could do something similar as we did in Milton Village, where we would lead, town contact, if you will, but we brought in MAPC and they led the community process and we gave them direction.
So the facilitator, yeah. I think Regina has her hand up.
And that was the way that it worked with the master plan itself, but what happened was there was a master plan committee, and so Dick Tabor and I served on that along with 10 or so other people.
Traffickers.
It was a
Yeah,
large
and there was,
There was
online.
and that committee was chaired by a member of the planning board, Emily Ennis at the time. 16. I remember it being a big group. Regina, please go ahead. I see that hand. I'm not going to keep talking.
No worries, no worries. I just was curious, how are the goals of the master plan tracked on a departmental level or on a municipal level? Is there a management system like Trello or something that allows jobs to be tracked? What is that mechanism? Because I think
a good recommendation for what should be in there, Regina. But you know, the way we did it over the last 10 years was phone calls and emails, manual. And then and a spreadsheet. Yeah, there is a spreadsheet.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to get at is that allows us to track and to reach out, but it doesn't allow for the assignment of jobs to particular people, and they're sort of reporting back on status without us individually reaching out. And so I'm just curious about what's behind the curtain in terms of, you know, DPW has to have some type of management system for the workflow.
So the thing about it, though, you know, is the only authority that we have is the implementation of the plan, and the plan itself was only adopted by the planning board. It wasn't adopted by the select board or the town meeting or the town administrator. So that's one of the issues I think over time that I would thought about, Regina, is that we can reach out and ask, hey, are you aware that this is in the plan and you're listed as the lead responsible party? But if they're like, if they don't have the resources, you know, either staff or funds, or if they haven't been asked or directed to do it by the town administrator or the you know, whomever the responsible party is, then they don't own it in a sense, right? So it is.
It's like voluntary compliance, right?
Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm. And what can I ask about the history of why the select board or town meeting were not involved in adopting?
Because the Mass General Law that I referenced before, it actually is specific to listings who adopts it, and it says the planning board. So this is one of these. It's one of these state law things. Yeah.
The state law requires that only the planning board adopt it, and not.
Yeah. So if you look at, you can look it up. Like if you just do a Google Mass General Law chapter. What was that? Give me 1 second.
No, that's fine. I'm just curious. Like I get it if the planning board was required to adopt something. What I don't understand is why then why there wasn't buy-in from the other groups as well.
I'm not sure there wasn't buy-in. It's just that when you start, like if you know, it wasn't given to, like, if the planning board doesn't have authority to impose that plan on anyone either. So we can't say, you know, Mr. Town Administrator or Ms. Town Administrator, you're responsible to implement this plan.
I get that.
Right? So.
But then why wasn't the select board was the select board interested in like signing on to that plan so that then there could be funding and other things attached to some of the standards?
So like our committee is supposed to recommend the resources necessary to implement the plan. And we're supposed to recommend that to the planning board and to the select board. So the timing, the resources, and the responsibilities, which I think generally when we have where we've through outreach or through particular topics, like when we worked on zoning or we worked on a war study, we've done, you know, we haven't looked at that spreadsheet in a while, but we did do a lot of outreach in putting that spreadsheet together. It's worth all of us looking at it again for any updates. Like I'm sure on the zoning side, I can have some updates for that. But so, you know, it's not as if there's not buy-in on it, I don't think. I just think it's just one of those accountability things that you would have different if it were a different type of organization. Like if you're thinking of your educational institution or a business or whatever, you know, there would be some pretty clear reporting and tracking. I think we've done what we think is a good amount of work on the tracking, you know, trying to be on the tracking side. It's just we don't have that reporting side. All right, there's no requirement to report to us, right?
I think,
Yeah.
for all the other committees to keep up with it, or even for us to keep up with it.
Yeah.
No, I agree. Can I ask if Josh, do you have an opinion, or does the planning department have an opinion on this?
Tell us what to think.
I won't be for Tim. But all the work that Tim and I do as a department outside of the many sort of like administrative things with regards to permits and managing the planning board and their requests, any in the bygone days, any discretionary grants, any sort of programs that we do that are sort of above and beyond the very specific management of what already exists, and particularly permits, and that permitting process. We use the master plan as a guide, and whenever we're on committees and in meetings, like part of our job is to be aware of, but there's not a sort of statutory requirement. But you know, anytime I am doing a project, right, every meeting on the microgrid, for instance, has a discussion of where in the master plan, which sections does it say this is something that's important, and then there's also subsequent things, right? Where in the hazard mitigation reports, and where in our MVP workshops, and where in our bike and pedestrian master plan, the house correction plans. There's a lot of plans that sort of mechanically, Tim and I have the responsibility and the intention, I guess I could say, of doing some of the implementation of, you know, right, like if we get a transportation related grant to do a project, it would be because that grant was highlighted in the master plan and the complete streets prioritization plan.
And that's part of why you want the plan, because it makes you eligible for certain grants.
And it also guides our work, right? Like without the master plan, right? There would be nothing for us to point to when we do additional work or the planning board.
You'd just be putting out fires left and right.
Yeah, and a lot of our job, without stealing any of Chief Madden's valor, is putting out fires, but it needs the plan and that plan to guide, but like as member Campbell Warren was saying, like tying, we don't have like performance metrics,
right,
or a cross-departmental tracking of this is the master plan goals, and then the cascade of, well, this is also the housing production plan, and this is, and how that affects every department. A lot of that is memory and the impetus of myself and Tim when we're in these spaces. We do that to the best of our ability, and everyone else is aware of these plans. Chase very much so for DPW work, but it's a guide for us rather than functioning as a mandate.
Right. But also important. I think that speaks to how important it is to have that guide be up to date.
Certainly, right? Like when I was helping insist on the need for a climate action plan and that committee, right? It was so that we could do the work to actually do climate implementation and apply for certain grants, because this is where it says so in the climate action plan.
Yeah.
So it's necessary as a guide, but we can't do everything, and there's nothing that ties us.
We have to be flexible too.
If a recommendation on Cunningham Hall has X amount of programs isn't met, that doesn't
make it not appropriate.
So what I'm kind of hearing is that maybe we should go for an extension of the time for 1 year, in the current charge, and we keep talking about the best way to go forward. I don't think we're going to solve it tonight, right? I just wanted to put it out there for discussion.
The article you sent out seems to read from 10 to 12 years.
I did two different ones. I did one for 1 year. And
I didn't see that one.
Oh, there was the front and the back. It says the big O. Did you send one out?
I didn't think that.
What Cheryl sent today.
Had 2 pages, no?
I only got
have
this.
the document that I have open. It's just
I only had the 2-year one.
that says
You have that?
12-year.
You have 2 pages? You do?
I only had this.
That's what I have.
Don't you have?
Oh, I'm sorry. Then
Yeah, that's all.
then I said the wrong thing.
Okay.
You have this one? You don't have this one.
I just have the 10 to 12 year.
Yeah.
Sorry, Cheryl.
All right. Sorry, I sent the wrong thing, guys. Mike. Okay.
You're misinforming me.
This was in my hurry up. I have work to do for my office, and I'm doing this for the family, right?
Everybody has a job. Let's stop it.
I
actually have no excuse.
It was basically that, but I did plug in and change the Board of Selectmen to Select Board,
There you go.
and I just said to see if the town will vote to authorize the select board and the planning board to continue to appoint, because I don't know if it needs to say that or not, but anyway, it's basically just, and then adding, you saw the same terminology.
Yeah.
About sustainability and climate change, conservation, facilities management, construction, public policy, and diversity and inclusion. Because those are the things we talked about that were kind of not in these categories. Now, is there any other category that?
No other category, but I do have a comment. I think that, when we reference the master plan, and I do this a lot, I have to be careful when I do this. It implies there has been sufficient resident input, buy-in, and general agreement to what we say. This is in the master plan. So in order to keep that current as part of a livable document, we're going to have to change this, because we were relying on information given to us either recently anecdotally or 10 or 12 years old, right? So I think that sort of causes a little problem, because like any town, there is a change in people. And in terms of so we're saying to people, listen, this is what people said 12 years ago. And I can say to my son who moved there 5 years ago, I said, well, that's great. No one asked me about this. And I think if we watch this, there's a fair amount of transition, if nothing else, in town, with new people coming in saying, gee, that's interesting, but no one asked me my opinion on this. So do we want to have an opportunity at some point? Maybe not next year. Money's going to be tight. This could be a free cash type situation. But should we be thinking about at some point, maybe trying to do a redo, not a total redo, but a redo, looking at the different categories we have in terms of the master plan going forward.
But we have to do the categories that are required by law. But I think we're going to give ourselves a little bit more time on the report, but I think we don't have to just make recommendations about the topics. I think we could make a recommendation about a process for updating it, which I don't think should be 10 years. Maybe it should be every 2 when there's some kind of forum. We haven't really talked about that yet, but I do think it is worth talking about that. I mean, this whole committee, the language of it, 'cause I was looking at the plan today. It's the exact language that was recommended by the consultant. It's in the master plan itself. The language of that was in this that established the committee. But thinking about the expense of it, I can see why you're not going to do it every couple of years. But just getting, maybe even every year there's like a one-time opportunity that gets reported that here's what the plan is, and kind of gives a broad overview of the plan. And if you have interest in a particular topic, the committee might be talking about that at some point this year. Give us your feedback. I'm just talking about, I think everybody could sort of think about what ways. And then the other thing is, really, is there a way to make sure more people know about it, right? And how we do that? Because some people know about it well. They'll refer to it like applicants for projects, like with the memory care facility, or, some people rely heavily on the words protect the character of the town, but they don't read beyond those words where it says and plan for its future. So there's this kind of, you kind of have to protect your plan that's in the plan, but how that kind of gets, it's such a big document, and how to use it, I think, has always been something we've grappled with, right?
Like a cheat sheet.
Yeah, a user's manual for the average citizen to learn about the basics, like, okay, why aren't there more businesses, or can I have a business near here, or there's too many businesses, or whatever, they want to know something about businesses. Why can I walk to something? Or, why don't we have ADUs, or why do we have ADUs? Just kind of like, not everybody's going to be interested in the depth of information that's in the plan. And the other thing I'll say about not doing the whole plan again is a lot of it's just background information. We have 2 volumes of background information that we don't need to repeat, I don't think.
No.
A lot of it's good information.
And maybe one potential next step is we could find out how much it would cost to work with a consultant to do a revision. Not necessarily that we would be doing it, but what's the cost that we're looking at? It does sound like we have consensus over that there's some revision that needs to happen at some point.
Yeah, now the revision really is the responsibility of the planning board in looking at the state law. Not that they couldn't delegate it to a committee like the board did before.
Yeah.
And then the board takes a vote on the work. So, if there was an update committee, it could have somebody from Sustainable Milton or the Climate Action Planning Committee, the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee, kind of these other things that.
Cheryl, don't add another committee.
That's why
Just utilize all different committees. Way too many committees.
That's why I was keeping.
That's why I don't even run with anything, because it's too many committees.
So then we're back to what I suggested earlier, which is to have a little reformation or the charge of the committee.
A brain truck.
You added like another year on and just sort of adjust it where it needs to be adjusted, and every so often, every couple of years, you do another revision. I mean, I don't think it needs to be, in my opinion.
All right. So can I just tell you what I had actually thought I sent you all?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. 10 o'clock. Yeah.
This will be the last thing. I was just going to say to revise the charge to include recommending targeted updates to the town's master plan and to submit those recommendations to the planning board and select board for approval. And I was making that 2 years instead of 1. So that was really, when I started off, I'm sorry, I thought you all had this, and I sent you the wrong one. So,
Sorry.
Sorry.
I think we do a year, but you can always give us more time again.
Another year to start.
I'm trying to call you, it's just going to come in.
So I just thought we'd give ourselves adequate time because they have to go to town meeting for approval. All right, so do you want to include what I said about the charge or not? What I just read to you. Revise the charge to include recommending targeted updates to the town's master plan and to submit those recommendations to the planning board and select board for approval. That's not in our charge right now. So,
Well, you were reading it out of our charge. It sounds like it should be.
It's not in our charge. And I was going to add that, and I was going to add.
Once I get it.
Yeah, sorry, I'll send it.
But there's also the added expertise that you detailed in what was enough.
Yeah.
And then the lifespan added to it.
So did you want only 1 more year? You sure?
Yeah, let's do it.
Then we can extend it for a year if we have to.
Okay. All right. So Regina, are you in agreement on that? The charge, the expertise, and the 1 year? I'll send that out to Josh and I'll copy all of you. It's going to go to the select board tomorrow night. Are you all good with that?
Sure.
Yep.
All right. That's it then, guys. We'll talk about
Later.
later.
Okay.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Voting with my red button.
Regina?
Yes. Yes.
Favor? Elaine? Dick?
Yes.
Roxanne?
Yes.
Cheryl, yeah.
Who's
Hi,
Dick?
No, Roxanne?
I made a motion, Josh.
I was second.
Thank you, Regina.